When you think about companies that change video games forever, you don't think about Canon, because Canon makes cameras, printers. Well, what if I told you that Canon, through its subsidiary Criterion, created Renderware, the game engine running every single game you see on screen right now, and many more. And yes, they also created Burnout 3, what is arguably the best racing game of all time. And what if I told you that one of the main reasons they really hit it off is that they stole a Konami game and got away with it? In 1987, Canon announced the EOS 650, the very first camera in the EOS series, and this was huge. Some publications like TechRadar call the 650 the iPhone moment of cameras, and the reason for that is that this is the camera that took autofocus to the masses. There were autofocus cameras before the 650, but this was the very first real, fairly affordable consumer autofocus camera, designed from the ground up around this new electronic lens system called EF. A system so good, it's actually powering the lens I'm using to record this video right now, almost 40 years later. Now, you might be rightfully wondering, where the fuck am I talking about a film camera system from the 80s? And the reason is money, because by the early 90s, the Canon EOS system would be the best-selling autofocus camera system in Europe and Japan, which in turn means that by the early 90s, Canon has a shitload of money and they don't know what to do with it.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the show. If you're just joining us, we have Bammy here in the hot seat. How are you feeling, Bammy? Okay, let's get right to the question. How did Canon spend the money raised from their astonishing success of their EOS camera system? A, they gave their CEO a raise. B, they threw a 90-day-long Coke party. C, they bought Pepsi's naval fleet. Or D, research and development.
Okay, so they were not trying to shoot Days of Thunder here. It's a traditional Japanese company. I don't think it's Coke. And also, I know for a fact that the Pepsi military fleet was sold for scrap metal. I think it's D. I think they were wise about it, and they actually just invested in research and development.
Is that your final answer?
Yes, this is my final answer.
You are correct. Congratulations.
Yes. So, what did I win precisely here? Also, where am I? What the fuck is this?
That is a lot of questions that we do not have time to answer because we have to move on to Chapter 2, Canon's UK laboratory shenanigans. In the early 90s, Canon starts opening research centers pretty much everywhere, and one of the places where they do that is Guildford in the UK. So in February of 1991, this research center hires a young, fresh PhD graduate named Adam Billiard. Canon just gives him one very vague goal. According to this old interview, they just tell him to go off and do some neat shit. So he does just that. And Adam's personal idea of neat shit was real-time 3D graphics. Right now, even a crappy off-brand smartwatch can display real-time 3D graphics, but back then, this was something that only dedicated 3D graphics workstations could do. If you needed to work on 3D graphics professionally, you had to be prepared to spend a lot of money. For example, take Rare, the studio that developed Donkey Kong Country. In order to buy 2 Silicon graphics workstations required to render the sprites for the game, Rare had to spend £160,000 for 2 computers. Adam's idea was to write fast 3D software that could potentially let you work on 3D graphics on any computer without having to buy any of this bullshit. Needless to say, this sounded impossible. But just like in the opening of B-Movie, Adam doesn't care what humans think is impossible. He just makes it work, and he knows he can do it because he has already done it. His PhD research paper was actually a 3D engine he wrote for Sun workstations. So he does it again, because Canon has Sun workstations. So by 1992, Adam, and consequently Canon Research Labs, have a working real-time 3D engine that can work on any normal workstation. This project immediately catches the attention of David Low-Key, which at the time was the president of the Canon Laboratories, aka Adam's boss. So David and Adam go to the Canon upper management and they ask them if it would be possible to turn this 3D engine project into a whole separate company, Criterion Software.
Criterion at that point would still be a part of Canon, it would be a subsidiary, so they would be using their money and they would be fully owned by Canon, but they would be independent in management and they would be only focused on this one project. Canon agrees, and by the end of 1993, Criterion Studios is officially born, with David and Adam acting as CEO and CTO respectively. Thanks to Canon's support and funding, they're able to turn this 3D project into an actual commercial product called Renderware. This first iteration of Renderware was basically like DirectX or OpenGL. It was not a video game engine, it was a graphics API. You actually had to build your own engine or software around it. But it started selling like hotcakes because by 1996, 800 companies were using Renderware. And we're talking big companies like Intel and Netscape, which apparently was like Google Chrome before I was born. In the early 90s, Canon was definitely making bank, thanks to Criterion's 3D graphics API. But then everyone started making 3D graphics APIs, and you know you gotta do something unique to stand out when Microsoft is coming for your ass. So what if Renderware wasn't just a normal graphics API? What if Renderware became the damn best graphics API for video games? Criterion did have some experience making their API work with video games already. They did publish a tech demo called Cyberstreet, which was a playable FPS. It wasn't good, it wasn't long, it wasn't even a real game, it was just their way of saying like, hey, you can do this with our technology. But now they wanted to actively get game companies to buy their technology over making their own. And how do you get a game company to spend money for your technology? How do you make it seem so good that they need to buy it from you? Well, Criterion's answer was to make games of their own. Criterion Studios is now staffed with games development teams who will initially produce 3 PC CD-ROM titles: Scorched Planet, Subculture, and Aquatech. Criterion was a bunch of very talented engineers, not a bunch of game designers, and it clearly showed because these games were basically just extended tech demos. They took a very simple concept like, okay, let's simulate racing speedboats, and they just tried to do that the best they could. And yeah, this is great if you want to showcase how great you are with your technology and your 3D stuff, but if you don't have a defined design or personality, the game is gonna be very forgettable. That's why we remember Wave Race 64 and we don't remember whatever the fuck this is. But that's fine, okay? They were a small studio making PC games right when PC games started becoming good. The problem is that then they start making games for the Dreamcast and...
Alright, here's the bottom line. A boring drag of a game that will surely lull you to sleep if you manage to keep from killing yourself first.
Just making an advanced tech demo doesn't really fly on consoles. If you want to make a splash, you have to at least have a somewhat good concept behind the game. However, in 1999, they developed a standout title that actually was reviewing and selling pretty well. Trickstal wasn't anything super original, it was just hoverboard races, but they got a claim to publish it and it was doing alright. It was what some might call endgame. Being that this is the only really successful game that Criterion has under their belt, Criterion takes the production manager on this game, a young woman named Fiona Sperry, and they ask her, hey, do you want to be the head of the entire games department? Because you seem to be the only person who actually knows how to make something that people will buy. Fiona says yes, but under one very specific condition. Criterion had to hire a real creative director. No random glorified tech demo bullshit. They had to get someone with a clear vision and one good passion project to work on. Criterion says, yeah, we can totally do that. Do you have anyone in mind? Now, you have to remember Fiona worked with Acclaim to publish Trickstyle, and she was in contact with this Acclaim marketing guy named Alex Ward, which seemed to be the kind of guy who knew gaming inside out. So she just says, well, let's get someone like Alex. And at this point, the COO of Criterion, which at the time is Mike King, the absolute Chad, straight up just approaches Alex Ward in the parking lot of a pub, which is the most British thing I've heard today, and asks him, hey dude, do you wanna maybe leave Acclaim and become our new creative director? Please, we really need this, please. Alex is not that interested because being a marketing guy at Acclaim meant he was able to go around the world, get to see every game in development before everyone else, know all the industry secrets because he wasn't working for one specific game development studio, but the company who actually sells the products they make. So everyone was trying to get his attention. But also, he was traveling way too much by plane. He was extremely tired, and Acclaim was becoming this weird company which was kind of unstable. So in the end, he just says yes. All right, cool. What do you want to do? Okay, so let's take a second here, because before we talk about what Alex was going to do, we have to talk about the stakes. We have to talk about why Criterion was doing all of this. Why did they get Fiona to try and build a better games team? Fiona joined Criterion when the company was still just considering itself a technology company, not a games company. And by 1999-2000, you still have to think of Criterion as a technology company trying to make the best games they could as a way to sell their technology. Hiring Alex as a creative director is a major move. And the reason this major move was considered and approved at all is that Criterion was trying to expand their entire business into making technologies for the upcoming consoles. The PlayStation 2, the Xbox, and the GameCube. Up until then, they only made games for PC and Dreamcast, and the Dreamcast was dying. When the PlayStation 2 got announced with very, very good hardware specs and a built-in DVD player, everyone knew that that console was going to sell. So Criterion was trying to shift the focus into being one of the first companies making and selling technologies for the PlayStation 2. And despite being technically a British company, thanks to their owners, Canon, they were among the first to get PS2 dev kits. So early and exclusive, they were locked in metal cages, physically bolted into the concrete of the offices they were working from. They were this early to the party. The game Alex would be working on would be the launch platform for the latest and greatest version of Criterion's technology, Renderware version 3. The PlayStation 2 had pretty beefy hardware for $1999, but that came at the cost of it being a pain in the ass to develop games for. Renderware 3 was a middleware that could basically act as a DirectX for the PS2, and GameCube, and Xbox, and PC. By buying Renderware graphics, you could make a game for the PS2, and then basically one-click port it to every other supported platform. This was awesome, but this was just the Trojan horse to actually get you to buy the entire Renderware engine, because starting with version 3, Renderware would not just be a graphics API, but a set of modules that worked as a complete engine. You could make an entire game using Renderware, just like you do nowadays with Unity and Unreal. In order to get game studios to buy Renderware, Alex had to work on a game pretty fast because they had to be early to the party to show other game studios that their technology worked, and this game had to be both something unique enough that would stand out and actually get good reviews from critics, and also a tech demo, because the actual games at this point were just a way to sell Renderware. They were basically advertisements you could buy. Well, since the moment he gets hired, Alex knows that this company is kinda desperate for an idea, and that's where his publishing background gives him a huge advantage, because he has a spreadsheet of every single project every game developer in Europe is working on for the next 2 years. He knows what Criterion should not work on, and from that he can figure out what they should work on. So, from the many glorified tech demos, he knows that Criterion is this team of very talented programmers, so he wants to build a game that showcases that, and being that Alex is very into racing games, the best way ever would be maybe making a simulator, like the best driving simulator. Oh yeah, Gran Turismo 3 is coming out, so maybe a mission-based game like Driver. Well, Sony is also working on something like that with Team Soho. It's called The Getaway. Okay, guys, Alex has a genius idea. An arcade game like Outrun, but it has super realistic crashes, like the First Need for Speed, okay, the one made with Road and Track. Gran Turismo 3 can't do that because car licenses are a pain in the ass. The car companies don't want you showcasing their car on fire. But if your game is using fictional cars, you can do whatever the f*** you want to them. So this idea turns into a design document called Driving Hero. That design document starts development under codename Shiny Red Car, and eventually in 2001, it gets released on PS2 as Burnout. The game is a critical success, and it's selling pretty well. In 2002, it even gets ported to the Xbox and GameCube. And it seems that Alex and the team have made it because people start noticing Criterion. They start not only buying Burnout, but also buying Renderware. But some other people, and sometimes the same people that praise the game with positive reviews, notice that Burnout is taking a lot of inspiration from another game. Thrill Drive is a 1998 arcade racing game by Konami. If you take footage from this game and you put it side by side with the first Burnout game, it's pretty much the same game. The camera angle is a bit different, but Burnout 1 is just a home console clone of this game. Now, there are some differences, like, for example, Thrill Drive somehow got licensed cars. You can actually crash a Fiat Barchetta, which is fucking wild. But most importantly, Thrill Drive and its 3 sequels never got any home console release. In order to be aware of them even existing, you had to be lucky enough to find an arcade cabinet of them near you. And they are obscure enough that I was pretty sure they got only released in Japan until some of you guys corrected me on Twitter, so thank you for that. But yeah, between this and Alex Ward being super aware about basically every game on the market, you can see why there could be allegedly a chance that they ripped off this game because they know they could get away with it and nobody would notice. And both games look generic enough that you always gotta give them plausible deniability, because despite the weird rumor suggesting that they even had a cabinet of Thrill Drive in their offices, which is a very strong accusation, we don't have any proof of that. I went out of my way to find every single picture of the Burnout development process, and there are no Thrill Drive cabinets here, okay? And also, let's be realistic, unless we get some sort of confession from an ex-developer saying, yes, we did indeed copy Thrill Drive, it's not like I have any proof. And it's not like any developer would just confess like that. In 2017, Ben Minto, one of the audio designers for Burnout 1 and 2, was interviewed by the website designingsound.org about his work at Criterion. And the interview is very interesting, like, I suggest you read it, it's very fascinating. But what's interesting for us right now is this one quote.
For the first Burnout, boost wasn't such a big thing. The cliché heartbeat and the focusing of the mix was all we implemented, fairly similar to Thrill Drive, which was a key reference for our first title.
That's it. It actually took me 1 year to find this one quote. I've been looking for solid proof, but in the end, it doesn't even matter. Did I just accidentally quote Linkin Park? The reason the title of this video includes the words "and get away with it" is that in the video game industry, this kind of thing happens pretty frequently, for the simple reason that video games exist in this scale which is always torn between them being both art, trying to convey someone's vision through an experience, and also at the same time products that humans have to consume, schlop that has to be made as fast as possible and sold for as much money as possible in order to make sure the company that's making the video games actually stays in business. And the pretty direct consequence of this is that a lot of beloved game sagas actually started with pretty unoriginal first chapters. And I think the best example to prove this is Call of Duty. Call of Duty Modern Warfare has changed first-person shooters forever, to the point where if you play it now, it almost feels too generic because everyone has copied from it. But the very first Call of Duty was actually made as a literal Medal of Honor killer. Making video games is a very, very expensive process, and to get the money to do it, you gotta convince the head of a company that yes, your idea is actually worth the company's funding, and the best way to do so usually is to point at something that's successful and say, we're gonna do that, but better. Playing the first Burnout game today feels pretty bland, pretty unoriginal. It feels undercooked, because it is. But the smooth 60 FPS gameplay and the crash gimmick were good enough to have people talk about Criterion not just as the guys who make renderware, but as a real video game company trying to do new and cool stuff. And this in turn led to more success for renderware, because wow, this super fast, good-looking game that runs on every single platform is actually running on an engine that I can license and I can use to make my own games. I mean, GTA 3, Vice City, San Andreas, Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 3, 4 Underground, Persona 3, 4, Bully, SpongeBob Battle for Bikini Bottom. That entire generation of consoles was built on renderware. And yes, Burnout was store-brand Thrill Drive, but it actually succeeded in making Criterion money. And that means that with the second game, after having already proved to everyone that the Burnout concept worked, and having enough time to do what they really want, Burnout 2 doesn't feel like Thrill Drive at all. Having already built Burnout 1, Criterion could now leverage the existing code base to speed up the actual development process when it comes to the actual nitty-gritty technical stuff and focus on making the game unique from a standpoint of UI, tracks, cars, music. The vibe you get playing this game is that it's a love letter to 90s arcade games, which is what Burnout 1 should have been. The entire presentation of this game is unique and it's drenched in this tongue-in-cheek British humor. Like, you start with a student driver series of tutorials, which instead of being challenging and actually a stopgap, they're a way to tell the player that this is a game where you have fun. You don't have to think about where to corner, where to brake. You have a button on your gamepad which activates the boost, which is a literal flaming, burning bar on your screen. It's fucking insane. It's taking inspiration, as I said, from all kinds of places, Daytona USA, Chase AQ, Fast and Furious even, but it's incorporating all of this in a very original framework because this is pure Criterion, and I think that what really shows us that is Crash Mode. Crash Mode is introduced with this game, and Crash Mode is what I think creates Burnout as we know it today. It retains the cars and the driving model from the normal races, but your singular goal is to crash your car into an intersection, making sure to cause as much monetary damage as possible. The higher the dollars, the better the ranking gets. And I think this is a perfect deconstruction of the entire Gran Turismo license kind of model, because you're literally being rewarded for being the worst driver ever. This is fucking awesome. This is what video games are made for. Burnout 2 incarnates destruction for the sake of fun. It's a game that doesn't take itself seriously, and I love it. Okay, so you might have noticed that I just spent a lot of time talking about Burnout 2, and I just glossed over the first Burnout, saying it was unoriginal, unpolished, and kind of a mess. Despite this video technically being about how the first Burnout was a copy of Thrill Drive, this is not a mistake. This is why I made the video, because Burnout 2 in an ideal world is the kind of game that should have launched the saga, and Burnout 1 is the compromise Criterion had to make in order to both make a splash with something that, yes, is bland and unoriginal, but had never been seen on home consoles, but was safe enough and based on something that was already existing in order to get the corporate overlords to greenlight the project at all. So what I'm trying to say with all of this is that the first Burnout game is not very good, it's not original, but we shouldn't blame Criterion or Alex Ward for this. We should blame how fucked up the video games industry was in the early 2000s. Speaking of which, the first and second Burnout were published by Acclaim, and I mean, of course, as I said, Alex used to work there, and I have no other way to say this, but Acclaim was fucking terrible. Burnout 2 is a banger game, and it sold extremely well just in the European region, because Acclaim basically didn't spend any money to market it overseas in the US, which is one of the most stupid moves I've ever seen. But you know what's even more stupid? In order to pull a marketing stunt, Acclaim decided to refund every driver receiving a speeding ticket in the day of the game release in the entire United Kingdom. I don't have to tell you how fucked up this is. Like, you're encouraging people to commit potentially deadly crimes. So it shouldn't surprise anyone that when in 2004 Criterion released Burnout 3, my favorite racing game of all time, it wasn't published by Acclaim but by EA. And I know some of you are going to say, wait Femi, isn't EA like the devil? Aren't they even worse? Yes, yes they are. But ironically, them being so fucking bad got Criterion to get complete creative control over Burnout 3. In order to understand this, we have to go back to 2001 for a second, when Criterion just released Burnout 1. Burnout was not the only game that Criterion was working on, because as a backup plan, they also work with Namco on Airblade. Airblade is a spiritual successor to Trickstyle, and it's a Tony Hawk's Pro Skater clone, made with Sony and Namco. It's good, but it got very quickly overshadowed by the success of the first Burnout game. But in a weird way, this game is the reason we got Burnout 3 as we have it today. So remember how I told you that Activision built Call of Duty as a direct competitor to EA's Medal of Honor? Well, EA wanted to do the same thing, and since they were impressed by Criterion's work on Airblade, they asked Criterion if they wanted to build a Tony Hawk killer. I mean, they wanted to kill Activision's game Saga, not the actual human skater. I don't think EA had something against Tony Hawk. The idea was for EA to reboot their 1987 Skate or Die saga with a game developed by Criterion. And Criterion, having this huge opportunity because EA had loads of money and loads of resources for them to access, said yes and started working on the project immediately. But then what happened is that the Grand Theft Auto saga exploded in success, and EA started asking Criterion to make the game more and more like GTA, to the point where they were overworking Criterion's developers so much, some of them started being physically ill from the stress. So at some point in 2002, Criterion basically says, you know what? F this shit. We are not working on this game anymore. EA, of course, gets mad. They threaten Criterion, saying that they will sue them and that they will be blacklisted from working with EA forever. But the Giga Chad Criterion doesn't budge and actually stops working on the game. Everything I just mentioned happened in 2002, basically right before Criterion published Burnout 2. So a few months pass, 2003 arrives, and Burnout 2 is a banger in Europe. It's selling a shitload of copies, and by E3 in May, everyone is wondering where Criterion is going to go next. And it is during E3 2003 that an employee from EA stops Alex at the convention and asks him to be friends again. Alex basically tells him to fuck off after that entire Skate or Die disaster. And Alex's refusal has another EA employee having the balls of saying to Alex, whatever, you guys just got lucky with Burnout 2. The game wasn't even that good. And because of this one spiteful comment, just to prove this random EA guy wrong, Alex goes back to EA and tells them, okay, you know what? We'll make Burnout 3 for you, but under one condition. You give us total creative control. You're not gonna see anything about the game until we have a playable beta in 7 months. When that beta is done, you either like it how it is, or you don't publish it. This guy has a set of massive Now, EA might be allegedly evil, but they're not stupid, okay? They know that publishing a Burnout game in the US with proper support and marketing would make them bag some money. So they accept. They actually give Alex and Criterion 7 months of complete freedom to make the damn best game they could. Now, if I consider Burnout 1 an unoriginal but necessary evil, and I consider Burnout 2 the game that created Burnout, I think Burnout 3 is Criterion at its peak. It's Criterion with full creative control, while also having access to the insane resources EA could provide to them. For example, the first thing you notice when you boot Burnout 3 is the amazing soundtrack. And the only reason this soundtrack is in Burnout 3 is because of the EA Tracks licensing program. And this is the core of Burnout 3, because like the music shapes the feel, the look and the theme of the game. Burnout 3 is not just a game about you crashing your car. It's a game where you have to take down your opponents in the most violent and insanely elaborate way. And the game rewards you for that with new cars, with new challenges. The police chase mode in Burnout 2 gets replaced by a new takedown mode, where you have to take down a minimum amount of opponents within a set amount of time. Burnout 3 feels like Burnout 2 under cocaine. And that's by design, because thanks to the renewed EA friendship, Criterion became closer and closer with the EA Canada team responsible for making the SSX games, which might be to this day the most 2000s thing ever made. And specifically, after playing a beta of Burnout 3, one of the producers behind SSX gave Criterion the suggestion of making Turbo in Burnout 3 feel like snorting a huge ball of cocaine. That's an actual quote, I'm not making this up. Add online to the mix and lose GameCube support, because according to Alex Ward, no built-in modem, no game, and you get what is, in my opinion, the best Burnout game of all time. When in January of 2004 EA played the beta of the game, they loved it. Alex Ward proved that if you let Criterion do their thing, and if you give them enough budget and resources, they would make an era-defining video game. Burnout 3, just like Call of Duty Modern Warfare, changed arcade racing games forever. And in the process, it made Renderware reach new peaks, making it so that, to this day, Renderware is the third most licensed video game engine of all time. Okay, this last part, I just made it up, because the truth is very sad and will make you hate EA even more than you probably already do. 2 months before releasing Burnout 3 in July of 2004, EA bought Criterion from Canon. Like, they acquired the company and they also acquired every single technology and asset. And yes, that includes renderware. And if you're wondering, Femi didn't just start the video saying that several companies were entirely relying on renderware in order to make games for PlayStation 2, Xbox, and GameCube? Yes, and right after being acquired, Criterion immediately tried to calm every customer, saying, I know we just got acquired by one of your major rivals, but you don't have to worry, nothing is going to change, we are still going to license out renderware to anyone who wants it. But that, of course, was a fucking lie. By 2006, renderware would not be licensed to third parties anymore. This was a huge shock to a lot of companies. Did you ever wonder why GTA 4 had a completely different engine compared to 3, Vice City, and San Andreas? That's the reason. Rockstar made the Rage engine because of this entire thing. And they also didn't make it from scratch because it's based on the engine that Angel Studio used for Midnight Club 2. But anyway, Burnout 3 was a creation so good it effectively killed the technology powering it for basically everyone but EA. So now if you're wondering what's the lesson you should take from this video, well, first, play Burnout 3. It's an awesome game. If you have a PS2, an Xbox, or wink wink, nudge nudge, you should definitely give it a go, even if you don't like racing games. It's very peculiar and basically every single person I know who tried Crash Mode had a blast with it. And the wider lesson is that if you look back at some of your most beloved sagas and you see some earlier titles being unoriginal and kinda bland, you should always keep in mind that more often than not, the actual people, the developers working on the game, probably wanted to do better, but they still have to answer to their bosses, which in turn have to try and make as much money as possible, as fast as possible. So, Alex Ward, Criterion, Burnout 1 kinda sucks, but it's not your fault. I get it. I'm over it. But you know what I'm not over? Fucking EA killing everything I love.